So you recently signed on to this letter to extend the Bush tax cuts, correct? I mean, is that something we need to do, and why?
Well, I think that we need to do major tax reform. And I think tax reform is going to be on the agenda in the 113th Congress. I think it's going to be front and center of the agenda. To avoid the fiscal cliff, and since we don't have a leader in the White House that wants to do tax reform, and if you really wanted to do tax reform, they would have done tax reform when they had all three levers of government. And so the last time major tax reform was done in this country was when President Reagan was in office. It's time to do major tax reform. I like to carry this with me because most citizens have never seen it. This is the Internal Revenue Code. It's about 10,000 pages of very fine print. It's overly complex. The American people don't understand it. Good night, the IRS doesn't even understand it. It's time for the American people to have a tax code that they understand, that's fair, and that solves our revenue problem.
So everybody has a different idea of how to do that. I mean, what is the closest plan that you've heard?
But I think there is some bipartisan agreement. In fact, President Obama said in both State of the Union addresses that I sat in on that he would like to see corporate welfare reduced. He'd like to see subsidies and tax giveaways reduced and then applied to lower rates so that we could be more competitive globally. I think there's broad bipartisan agreement for that type of strategy. And so if we say those things about businesses, we could say the same thing about individuals. How do we make the code much simpler and have lower rates for everybody so our economy can grow and revenue can go up?
I've heard a little bit of frustration with some people that have known you, and they say, you know, Reid looks at every problem so objectively, and you measure it and you weigh it, and then your votes have been more on the party line side. You've been more conservative than people may have expected. Have you heard that, and how do you respond to that?
Well, I look at it this way. I get to vote on the finished product. And the finished product is whatever comes out of the committee and whatever comes through the floor and is amended. And with every single vote, you have to evaluate the good and the bad in that vote. And so with every single vote, unless it's a bill that you write yourself, you're not going to have 100% agreement with it. And so because it's already the result of some form of compromise. And so I know that every single time I put the card in, I'm going to be voting for something that I might dislike, and some of the people who sent me here would dislike, but there may be more that I like, and the you know, kind of the fulcrum shifts the weight, and you say, okay, there's enough good in here that I should continue to go for it. Now, I can tell you that some of my colleagues in leadership are not as convinced about me being with them all the time. For example, Eric Cantor. Now, this is the House Majority Leader. Eric Cantor had a bill that called for a 20% tax reduction for small businesses. And it was a temporary reduction for 1 year. Typically, when the majority leader brings a bill to the floor, you vote for it. I was one of 8 Republicans that voted against it. There have been times that I've been the only Republican voting with Democrats. And so I think it's a little specious to say that, you know, I've just voted along party lines. But with that said, I am a conservative guy. I ran as a conservative guy, and I'm voting the conservative values that the voters expected me to do.
So we had a few questions ahead of time on healthcare. This is from Sarah on Facebook. She says, do politicians discuss how to cut healthcare costs, or do they just debate how to pay for healthcare? A free market system sounds good, but when medical costs are not transparent to the average citizen, it's tough to make sound choices.
Yes, that's a really great comment that she made. I think she's onto something there. And however, there is more debate that goes on about actually getting at the drivers of the cost, actually reforming the healthcare system so you can get to a lower cost. And there's a whole bunch of things that have to happen that would result in a better health outcome. If Americans are healthier, if we ate better, if we exercise more, and we spent more time on preventive stuff, we could drive costs down. If we recognize that the legal system has abused the American people, and we can reform medical liability lawsuits to a point that changes physician behavior. So they're not ordering tests just to defend themselves from a lawsuit, but they're ordering tests because it will get a right result. There are those types of reforms that actually would affect the cost. And that type of conversation is going on a lot right now because what the Affordable Care Act did is it reformed insurance but didn't reform health. And she's exactly right. What we need to do is reform health costs so that we can begin to drive costs down. I like the conversation on transparency. Every other industry, prices are readily available for you to find. It's very complicated to get pricing because of how we currently sell healthcare. And there's certainly some improvements there, and that's also on the agenda.
So where do you fit on this scale of repeal and replace, completely repeal, and just go back to where we were? What do we do with?
Well, I don't think going back to where we were was acceptable. I believe that there are problems systemic to how we were delivering health care that were running prices up, and the American people were getting really frustrated by it. I don't believe that a government takeover of it either was the right answer, and so I'm supportive of repealing the Affordable Care Act and replacing it with the Republican plan that would reform medical liability insurance, that would change physician behavior, that would focus on outcomes, that would provide transparency, that would interject competition into the system, and it would bring patients closer to providers. So doctors and patients are making decisions, not lawyers and Washington bureaucrats.
So are there things in the law now that you like? I know there's the young people really like this 27 and under provision. Was that something you'd support?
Yeah, it was interesting. I was with the folks at Humana that asked me to come and speak to their employees earlier this week. And I actually made the comment, I was surprised it's taken the industry this long, because the big argument has always been, how do we get healthy bodies into the risk pool?
Right.
If you've got just broken down bodies like mine in it, the costs go up. But if you get healthy young bodies in it, you can actually make the overall risk pool less expensive. And so it's interesting that it took a mandate by the government to get it done. But I will tell you, if the Affordable Care Act disappeared tomorrow, all those insurance companies would leave that provision in place because it's driven costs down. And so there were some good conclusions that were made there. And I think that's one of them. I think you highlighted one of them. And so.
Last time we spoke a lot about constituent service. It's a big part of the job that doesn't get as much attention. So what has that been like, being able to kind of help people,
I'm really glad, Nick, I'm glad you asked that question, because it has been a bit of a hot button for me. I think it's really the big untold story of every congressional office. There's 435 of those offices around this country. We have senior citizens coming in who are struggling getting their Social Security disability payments, or a Medicare bill didn't get paid. We have recently had a 92-year-old World War II veteran who hadn't gotten his medals. 50 years this man was waiting for his medals. We were able to help him get his medals. And what a treat to deliver those medals to him. I had a father whose son committed suicide in Afghanistan, one of the tragedies of this current deployment. But his son still had medals that he had earned, and he wasn't able to get them, and we made sure that his dad got those medals.
It's got to be rewarding.
Yeah, and those things are rewarding, but the untold story of what goes on. And you have a dedicated staff of citizens that came to work for us that take this work very, very seriously, to try to solve problems with businesses that are having interaction with the government, and we try to break down those barriers and get the problem solved. And that's almost the most rewarding thing that we do. What a treat it is to help people solve problems.
Yeah, I can imagine. We have another question from our online audience.
A couple of questions. Ask what your response is to Mitt Romney's comments about 47% of Americans are victims and feel like they're entitled to benefits.
Yeah, I think my response is pretty similar to what Paul Ryan said. Sometimes in the heat of campaigns and discussion, you say things that aren't all that articulate or don't come out the way you want. It happens to candidates all the time. It happened to Barack Obama with his "you didn't build that" statement. And then right away, the other side wants to pounce on it. Just Republicans pounced on the president. Now people are pouncing on Governor Romney. My response to the 47% is recognizing who those people are, often who those people are: senior citizens. Sometimes they're underemployed, that are not earning a living wage or an income that puts them into a tax bracket where they pay. But I think what Governor Romney ought to tell that 47% is, this economy is struggling, and it's struggling in part because the policies of President Obama haven't worked. He promised to cut the debt by 50%. He hasn't done this. He promised to get unemployment under 8%. He hasn't done that. And in part, they're in this position in life because this economy is not working for them. And but there is hope and change coming, that the economy can get better. And if they would help Governor Romney get into office, we could begin to do the types of things that would cause our economy to grow, and we could help lift them up.
Another question from our audience.
What's your position on the Ryan Medicare plan?
On the which one?
Ryan Medicare plan?
The Ryan Medicare plan? Well, I think, first of all, we should explain what the Ryan Medicare plan is, because it's been so demonized. One of the things I've been so disappointed with has been this idea that if you try to fix a big problem in America, the other side's just going to pound you with a club. And we saw it. The Ryan Medicare plan is very similar to the Bill Clinton, Alice Rivlin Medicare plan back in the 1990s. So what happened then? Republicans beat Bill Clinton with a club when it was his idea. Now it's a Republican idea, so Democrats beat them with a club because it's now not their idea. It's all about getting credit, and it's one of my big frustrations. But here's what the plan would do. It will prevent Medicare from going insolvent. And it doesn't affect anybody 55 years or older. So if you're living under the promise that was given to you as you went into your retirement years, that promise is secure with our plan. But then for younger workers, because we know, according to the CMS actuaries, that Medicare goes insolvent, we can't accept the status quo. We can't just say, I don't like this, but I'm not going to give you my ideas. We actually have to begin that important conversation. So, Nick, someone as young as you has Medicare when you arrive at that place in life. It won't be there if we just accept the status quo. But here's what that plan does. It provides guaranteed coverage. You cannot deny coverage. But it takes this block of 50 million seniors, and the Medicare system will take this large customer base and have the private sector bid on these guaranteed benefits. The government will take the second lowest bidder. So if you're a senior and you see that plan and you like that plan, you can take it and it won't cost you 1 penny more. You just get that plan. If you would rather look at the plan that was the lowest bidder, you can get that money back to you. If you would like to have a gold-plated plan, now you can have it, and you'll pay the difference. What it does is it takes out the 15 unelected bureaucrats in the Affordable Care Act, takes them and says, you're not in charge anymore. You're not going to make the decisions. 50 million American seniors will make their own decisions for themselves. And they can choose a plan that doesn't raise their costs, or if they would prefer, they can choose a plan that is cheaper, or if they would prefer, they can choose a plan that costs more. And so I'm supportive of it, but I will say this as well. I'm willing, able, and ready to listen to any idea from any Democrat, from the most progressive member of the chamber to the most conservative Republican. If they have ideas to improve it, this is a framework to begin the discussion so that we can finally fix the problem, because the status quo won't work.
Another question from our audience.
A question asks, what's your position on abortion?
I'm pro-life.
And
I'm pro-life.
That's
That's
simple
it.
as that. Then.
That's it. Yeah.
Do you think the social policies are over-reported, overblown? I mean, it seems like it's a smaller part, but it's such a passionate part in every election and every political.
It becomes passionate. It becomes passionate because there is, for most Americans, a religious element. And when there's an intersection between faith and government, passions will arise. And so I think you tread carefully in making changes there. But the real issue facing most Americans, and the thing that drives what's going on right now, is whether or not they have a job, whether or not that job will be there tomorrow. And the economy is on everyone's mind. This election is about jobs and the economy.
Yeah, I mean, given how important the presidential election is to your future, if you're in Congress, what do you think of Romney's seemingly downward trend, here, at least here in Wisconsin just recently, and what do you think he could do better or differently? And Walker's come out and said, use Paul Ryan more. He's so popular. He's your friend.
Well, I think using Paul Ryan in Wisconsin is a wise thing to do, but I think that both Barack Obama and Mitt Romney have to take a look at the dynamics in this general election. They have to build their strategy, and they have to go out and execute it. And they're getting plenty of advice. They don't need a freshman member of Congress how to do it. And I'm confident that Mitt Romney will win in the fall.
All right, well, we're just about out of time. Is there anything else that we didn't ask you that you want to make sure the people of Appleton and all around the world?
Well, I think nothing that I want to make sure that you ask me, Nick, but I will tell you, it's been an extremely humbling experience to be a member of Congress. It's been an honor to be a member of Congress. I'm proud that the folks here have decided to send me there, and I'm looking forward and asking them to send me back.
All right, great. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
If you'd like to see this interview in entirety, you can do so by going to postcrescent.com/live stream. And we'll invite you to join us for 2 events tomorrow. At 10 a.m., we'll have former U.S. Senator Russ Feingold here for a special edition of Newsmakers. At 3:45, we'll be live streaming First Lady Michelle Obama's speech at Lawrence University. Thanks a lot for joining us this afternoon.